Okie dokie. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Origin Story. How's it going? How's everybody doing? How have you been navigating? We are recording this in the midst of, and slightly after the timing of this giant planetary alignment that is going on.
Apparently,
So,
yeah.
yeah, apparently. I don't know very much about this, but it sounds like people think this is a thing that we should be paying attention to. Um, I don't really know what it means, but I was certainly feeling some feelings over the weekend, feeling some things. And that seems to be ongoing. So yeah,
Yeah.
the chaos ensues.
Yeah. If anybody is, needing to feel more feelings, I have an excess of feelings and I'm happy to lend it out to anyone in case you're not feeling enough in your life right now and you're feeling a little numb. I have plenty of extra feelings for everyone. So, yeah.
I wish we could have a like a lending library
Oh,
for
that would be
things like
great.
that. It'd be like if someone wants me to, if I can outsource some of the emotional release, that
Yeah.
would
Some
be
sort of
perfect.
emotional library. Like, oh, yeah, you can borrow my emotions for as long as you want. Like, I don't need these for a little while. So you're welcome. It's for free. You don't even, I'm not even going to charge for it. Like you can literally just have them and
So
keep them as long
generous.
as you wish. I won't even charge if you don't give them back ever. There's like fees at the library if you don't return the book sometimes. You can just keep all of those emotions for as long as you want. They are not necessary because I'm just fine.
Oh my goodness. What a concept that would be. Maybe one day
Yeah. Maybe
in
one
the future.
day
Who knows?
we'll
Not that
look
I
into
can see
that.
anyone being like, I'd really like to have more emotions. I mean, you have to like drag us through a hedge backwards to get us to learn to feel the feelings in the first place, right? It's
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's like actually a really interesting place to begin because it's connected with what we were feeling to speak into today, like the chaos of what is swirling both within and without, and emotions being such a natural thing. Uh, yeah, you had a beautiful way that you were speaking to it earlier, Jess. So I'm going to stop talking because I don't know that I have the language. Too many emotions swirling to get the words out. So I'm going to lob it on back over to you. Please help.
beautiful.
Take it away.
Yeah. So as I was walking on the beach this morning, or maybe I'll even, if just in case anyone has, this is the first episode they're dropping in with, little recap. The way we create on this podcast is we trust divine inspiration. We trust the thread of what is alive and what is true and what is being shown to us in each and every moment. So we don't have a plan for what episodes we're recording. We tune in and feel into what appears to be coming into the field and what feels correct to speak to. And essentially, that's what we're going to be going into on this episode a little deeper. We've touched on it in episodes about the muse and the creation, a divinity and our humanity. Like it is a common thread through a lot of our episodes. It's a lot of what we do. But we're going to go a little deeper and unpack this idea of surrendering to that divine impulse, that divine inspiration, the natural order of things. I believe it is the organic. You hear this phrase if you're in the new agey online spaces, um, the organic matrix or the divine matrix. And over the years, I've been shown and was instructed, I believe, by some plants uh, at the beach this morning as I was tuning in and asking nature and asking God, what wants to come through, what really wants to be shared and spoken to today. And I was given that image again of like the organic matrix, the divine matrix, if we want to call it that, within nature that exists as a template, as an example for us of what this really looks like. And it tends to look like chaos. And I've been shown that over the years. Is like from a distance, if we look at nature, it looks like it's just all over the place, being chaotic, doing what it does. It can look wild and vicious and powerful and destructive. It can look very beautiful and sweet and light and ornate and pristine and perfect. It has so many different facets, and when left to its own devices, it looks uncontrollable and wild and doing whatever it is. And from a distance, if to us as humans in our very logical brains, it doesn't necessarily make sense until we look closer. And the closer and closer we look, the more and more we see the perfection and the order that actually exists in that. And it's not an order of logic, it's not an order of things are linear, but there is a symbiosis and a co-creation and an interwoven interdependency between everything that exists in nature that I believe is a very, very beautiful example of what the divine matrix looks like. And like the trees are not showing up thinking about or planning out how to offer their fruit to a specific niche of birds by writing their marketing plan and their signature offers, right? They're just being a tree. And there's just an innate blueprint that means the specific fruit that they put out, the specific shape they have, the leaf shape, the colors, the environment they're in is just innately perfectly designed for the role it is meant to play in that ecosystem, in that symbiosis, and it just works, right? So then we have all the other parts, the animals, the plants, the mycelium, the composting process, the nutrients returning to the earth. Like if we leave nature to do what nature does, it is perfection. It's complete perfection. It just works. It thrives when we don't interfere. But us as humans, we've sort of forgotten that we're part of that. And so we've sought to sort of distance ourselves from it and live in these cute little boxes with walls to keep us away from the scary nature and the uncomfortableness. And so the more and more we've distanced ourselves from that, I think the more and more we've distanced ourselves from the understanding that we are a part of nature and we are not dominating over nature. Like we're clearly not doing well at this.
No,
We
it's not
try,
working.
but like there are far-reaching consequences to us messing with all of this and trying to control it and contain it. And I think it's really important at this time that, it's not just that nature is like there and pretty and we need it to support humans to survive. It's like, no, we're a part of that field. We're a part of that ecosystem, but we're trying to remove ourselves from the ecosystem instead of let go into that ecosystem more deeply. I think there's a lot of wisdom that we've lost there.
So eloquently put. And as you were speaking, one of the first images that came through was an impressionist painting, right? So this idea that when you're really up close to something, to an impressionist painting, it just looks like a lot of swirls and nothingness. And if you give yourself a chance to zoom out, you can see the intricacies and the beauty of what the bigger picture is and how all the different brush strokes move together to create something pretty magnificent. And the whole point of an impressionist painting is to show like the aliveness and the movement of a moment, which is why it looks like that. And that's how it feels in allowing ourselves to really embrace the ephemeralness of nature. Because, yeah, I was also having a little chuckle to myself thinking about the tree getting its marketing plan to like ensure that the right birds are coming in for the fruit, making sure that it has enough and, doing inventory and all the things. And excuse me, it just doesn't work like that, does it? It just is perfection, but based on the elements. And it always comes back to the elements, I feel like, too, because if there's an excess of rain, the trees, the plants, the animals will behave differently and accordingly. And co-facilitate life together in such a way that it accounts for that without needing to be like, okay, so we had X number of inches of rainfall today, and so that means that we're going to behave a certain way in order to get from point A to point C, which is what we need to do by the end of each day to consider ourselves successful in achieving what we're supposed to achieve. And, one of my favorite concepts that's come through recently is like a flower doesn't worry about the perfect time to bloom. It just trusts that it's time. And it just does its thing anyway. And the fallacy of being human is thinking that we have control over timing and order of things and considering ourselves separate, which I feel like really started back during the Enlightenment, the Western European Enlightenment age, when we started separating brain from body. I think, therefore I am, the dark Cartesian thought, right? I think and therefore I am versus I am and therefore I am, right? We separate the brain from the body, whereas the truth is that the brain is the body. It's the mind, which is separate, which likes to behave differently. And there's always this interesting weave of both as a human, and this is part of the balance of being human. And we've touched on this in multiple episodes of you are God essence. And at the same time, you are a fraction of something much larger than yourself, which is also outside of yourself, which is also God essence. And it's always both at the same exact time. And to be able to hold that concept is really intense. At least for me, when I came into this realization that I am God, but I am also a fraction of God, it puts things into this interesting perspective of how do I move through the world manifesting my desired outcome in reality, and how do I surrender to that which is already happening, regardless of what I want. One of the cards I keep getting, it's interesting, I pulled cards this morning and the one I got was my will to thy will. And I've had some interesting things in my own personal life lately where I think I want something, this one thing, and it looks this certain way. And then I'm saying I want something else. And I'm trying to force that thing of something elseness to be the thing I think I want, versus I'm actually being given what I want, but in a completely different form than what I thought I wanted, if that makes sense. And it's like, maybe I don't actually know best. Maybe there's something happening here in a greater context where I can surrender to the idea that I'm getting exactly what I want and what I need without forcing it to look a certain way. Can I allow that to be true? And that's been really fascinating, albeit also very confronting, which is really like my word, I think, probably for the next decade or couple decades. But it's definitely the word of the moment where I'm continuously confronted with what is actually happening and what do I think I want to happen? And can I let that go? And this whole concept of surrender has been and softening has been one of the deepest themes of my life to date, and especially more intensely over the past several years since the beginning of my my spontaneous Kundalini awakening back in 2017.
So beautiful. Yeah, the surrender piece is not easy, nor is it fun sometimes.
Can
Um,
be, but not usually.
it can be, but usually, I don't know, in my experience with some things are really great to surrender. Some things we're like, yes, take this. I hand this over to you, divinity. And quite often those are the things that we don't like, right? Things that we don't like about ourselves. It depends. Like we can struggle and wrestle with things that we don't like more sometimes because we want to control it even more. But quite often if we get humbled by it enough, we're willing to be like, okay, I'm going to give this over. The things that have been beautiful or good, I have found to be harder to reach a place of humility and letting go around. Um, I say this to clients a lot because it just happens to end up that when working with people, it ends up in mysticism, like the end to this work, the end to this, like the natural direction of this is connecting to divine order. And I say a lot, it's like everything you've ever wanted will be challenged. Like, are you willing to let that go? Are you willing to let go of wanting? And it's like when this is something I was like I struggled with in my business, and what led to a lot of adaptation and trying to put things behind like into neat little boxes that were understandable and things like that was because how are you supposed to sell let go of wanting anything? Like literally every marketing thing you see is, do you want this? Do you want this? It's like, do you want to want nothing at all? Like, yeah, like it's not the sexiest concept in the world for a lot of people. It does prioritize internal, intangible measurables, immeasurable qualities and characteristics that are so much more worthy, but we're in a world that prioritizes tangible things like numbers and whatever it is, wherever those numbers are, right? Achievements, all of these things, as you were saying before. So this quality of connection to divinity is not often something that we yearn for, or we don't realize we're yearning for it. And so we're seeking it through these tangibles, through these productivity measures, or through these, the size of my bank account, the size of my business, the magic of my perfection of my family and the house that I've built, or whatever it is, right? We look for it in these tangible things. I got the job, I got the career, I got the partner, I got the like things we can see, rather than the things we can feel and sense and notice. And so surrendering that type of thing is not easy because it's like, oh, well, but I like those things. I enjoy those things. Those are good things, especially if they're working for me. Where would I reach a place of being humbled around that? And so some people who have their like rapid awakenings, like the universe steps in and goes, you're not following your soul path, can experience these like incredibly chaotic feeling periods of life where it seems like everything just gets, you know, pulled away, like the rug gets pulled out from under them. And it can be these very impactful, very intense, quite often painful experiences that humble the sense of control to a place of, I don't know what I want. I had everything I wanted. Like now what? Now what do I do? What do I do with my life? Everything got taken away. What do I do? And these very transformative moments are that chaos, right? It is that divine chaos, the divine order of whatever's going on. But to reach that level of humbling can be hard, because what we're taught to do as humans is when something goes wrong, fix it. Step in, take charge, take control, cling on, figure it out, solve the problem, instead of giving ourselves space to lean back and just go through a sorting and sifting process where everything starts to get questioned.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to do that, we start to see the miraculous nature of how it all at some stage falls into place. Like, it all works out eventually. You
Right.
might not like how it's working itself out, but it does all work out. Divinity
Yeah.
knows us better than we know ourselves. Letting go of what we want means we can be gifted with experiences and opportunities that we never would have chosen for ourselves, but that are infinitely more joyful, fulfilling, and profound than we would have come up with or written in our little affirmation manifesting journal, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like one of the really beautiful new mantras I have is this beautiful prayer to love it to essence, where I say, I'm ready to be delighted. Show me that it gets to be better than I can possibly imagine. Because maybe what I imagine, even though I have a pretty amazing imagination, it's pretty wild and vivid and beautiful, maybe that's limiting. Maybe my own imagination is limiting me to only getting what I want, when actually there's something so much more aligned and beautiful waiting for me. So it's this beautiful dance that I know for myself I've been experiencing, in terms of I'm getting clear on what it is that I want, which is important, because when we don't know what we want, universe will just be like, do you want this? And you're like, eh, maybe. But also I want this other thing. And it's like, okay, then it gives you that. And you're like, no, not that. And so like universe will continue to just hand you, or will literally just like not hand you anything. And that's when I found for myself, at least, where I feel stuck energetically. And I'm like, why is nothing moving forward? And it's because I'm not making a decision. I'm very indecisive on what I want. But as soon as I know what I want, universe will start to give me that, and maybe give me the opposite of that too, just to and I'm going to use the word test, not because there's something to pass, but just to be like, well, what are you choosing? Do you really want this thing, or do you not? And ever since I've started surrendering more and more to delight, I have been experiencing miracles. And it's edgy because on paper, that quote unquote success, or like measurable standard of success, is not present, right? I don't have X number in the bank account. I don't have this partner. I don't have, whatever it is that we're measuring. But the in world experience is so rich and vast. And I find that I am always given exactly what I need in divine timing. And divine timing is Kairos, chirological time, versus Chronos, which is chronological time. So chronological meaning, from moment to moment in a sequential way, but chirological is the goddess. It's this divine timing. And we live in both. We do live in a reality that is chronological on this material plane, but there is also something else at play in Kairos. And it often takes more time to be clear on what is actually aligned, to surrender to the chirological time frame, which, as we move along in our collective humanity, we become less and less patient to wait for it. And the 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 way ahead that I have been finding, which can be a lot, is to notice, okay, what is for me is always going to be for me. What is not for me is always not going to be for me. And nature, the natural order of things, will always give me what I need and take away what I don't. And can I be okay with that? And I have been finding more and more and more that the things that are not for me, they don't feel easeful or graceful. And the things that are actually for me are very, very natural in feeling. And oftentimes when I resist that or get into my mind space, any kind of traumaed or triggered response, that's where it becomes difficult. But can I release that too? And then I come back into my body and feel what's actually natural. Can I see what's actually happening? And it's like, oh, yeah, everything is moving forward exactly as it should. And that is deeply humbling because it means that I don't know best. And I'd love to think that I do. And in some ways, I do know best, but it's always the paradoxical and it's always both. And straddling those worlds requires a level of embodied intimacy with self and with source that takes time because it's a huge concept. And to be able to hold these multiple frameworks of reality requires a really huge breadth of embodied gnosis of what that means. And it's both feeling empowered and courageous enough to claim your divinity and also humbled enough to know that there is something bigger at play than anything you could possibly begin to fathom.
So beautiful. Oh, there's so many things coming in. I'm like, what's feeling really present is I was thinking of Nicole Daedon and her work, and she's the creator of Oming, orgasmic meditation. But she channeled the Eros Sutras as well. And like just in her content, when she speaks to the Eros, she calls it the Eros, what we're following, right? The thread that we're following. When she's speaking about desire, it's like a different energy than want. And I think that's a beautiful differentiation because it's like we do need to know what desire is calling us forwards. And there's a God-given desire that calls us forwards, that gets us interested. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a clue, right? We'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, we need to have innate desire and interest, but there's something, sense it is more, there's in it. Oh, this is making, sorry, microphone decided to do a thing by itself. There's that God-given desire to me feels almost different, where it's like it's a call forwards, it's a call forth, and there may not be a logic to it, right? Whereas it like an ego want, a limited want could be I want that car, or I want that house, or I want that business, or I want that whatever it is, right? And I think the transition that humanity is making and starting to understand, well, actually, there's a feeling that you're imagining you're going to get from that actually is the desire, is the true desire underneath. It's like, how am I going to feel in that? is that feeling available now? Because we often place it in these external things, right? And so there's this beautiful opportunity to weave with desire in a way that is just like, it's just the calling forwards. And the deeper we can drop into that, as you're sharing, like back into the body, right? Not letting the mind get in the way and construct these things of like, oh, well, this is the tangible outcome and goal that I want. But there's a deeper feeling and sense, there's a desire that is calling me forwards, that is here now, but is also like, yes, and more, please, right? There's more that we can cultivate and create from this. And so therefore it pulls in a certain direction. And then it might change and it might be illogical and it might be the next thing, right? Eros being this thread of desire that's like, oh, go this way. And it's the thing that ends everything else, where like the voice of God underpins everything else and keeps pulling us into the right experiences or the right lessons or the right growth opportunities or the fires through which we are forged into the person who can hold what is meant for us, what is in our destiny. But we're so busy so often in this, like, well, this is the thing that I want. And we keep going towards the thing that we want. And we're so consumed by the making this happen that we're like missing the whole underlying journey and growth, expansion, and the becoming that's underneath that. The purpose of all of this, the purpose of want is the wanting, is the desire, is to follow the thread of the desire, not to end up with the thing. Like you can end up with the things, that's fine. But like the purpose, I mean, in my understanding, my belief is that it's about that growth so that we can actually hold what is way bigger, way more, way better, way more fulfilling, what is divinely intended under it all, to allow that unfolding. And yeah, it feels really beautiful. And the other piece that was coming in like related to this was literally this difference, right, between what we're trying to make happen. And I've sat with the concept of like, how much free will do we actually have? A lot. And from reading like the gene keys and things like this, there are things that hint towards Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. There are things that point towards like a genetic pre-programming of when things are meant to happen in Kairos timing, in divine timing. People think that there's this loosey-goosey idea of divine timing. It sounds loosey-goosey, but if you look at nature, the orchestration could not be fabricated by a human being. To have that many working pieces and parts to all come together and match in exactly the right moment, and the soul contracts or opportunities opening, whatever it is, lessons we need to learn. Had we forcibly tried to learn it 2 months earlier, it wouldn't have gone in, kind of thing. Like there's a perfection in the chaos of all of this that makes you look and go, well, maybe we are just genetically pre-programmed. Like everything is down to a T. We can't actually make anything happen. Not even our own people are like, oh, but what about my personal growth? Like I did all this work and like all this stuff happened. And I've looked at it and I'm like, it would probably happen to some degree, but my conscious participation, I believe, makes a difference, right? Divine co-creation. I believe conscious participation makes a difference. I believe that's why we come into the phrase of thy will, not mine, be done, right? Which is a very triggering phrase for a lot of people. I know because I use a lot of Christianic language a lot of the time, just because it's what I know and can resonate with a lot of the time. It doesn't mean religion, but it is a concept that we find hard, because it's like, oh, well, if the divine is in charge and everything's pre-programmed, then I don't need to make choices, right? Like you were saying, it's like, I don't need to make choices. I don't need to, it'll just happen. But would it happen if I just sat on my couch and waited? Probably not. Like that desire calls us forwards. We've got to meet the desire and trust and follow it. and be in a co-creation with something that we have surrendered to, because we are going in blind. We can't see infinity, though a lot of us like to believe that we can. We can't see infinity from our human finite minds and bodies, and that's okay. We can't know it all, and that's fine. We can follow that thread and like come into that deep surrender, but I believe it has to be a choice. We have to make choices every second of every day along the way, but it's how do I make that in accordance in with what is in the divine's plan for me, or what is already programmed to happen at particular times. Can I do it in alignment with rather than in opposition to, but as a conscious choice to surrender, which is very difficult. We like to be
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's so much that's come up. You're here.
Just agreeing.
Just agreeing, yeah. Just that's just God. It's just the dog. God dog, agreeing in the background there. There's so much that came through as you were speaking to that, and I'm going to try to remember all the pieces in the order you spoke to them. First is this play with want and desire. And I had a session with another sister back in the fall, and we were looking at this distinction between want and desire, and actually realized that want stems from the word wanton and wantonness, which is usually affiliated with pleasure and lustiness, and usually affiliated with women, specifically a wanton woman. Well, actually, this concept of want has been detached from the pleasure, and it's more connected these days to the mind game of what something looks like than to the pleasure body. But there is a level of like want that is actually, I've been playing with, is okay because it's actually attached to the desire and the pleasure. But it's getting back to the etymology of words too. It just feels really interesting because, again, wantonness is almost always referred to the feminine. And where do we hold the pleasure energy in our bodies? It's in the sacral. In the feminine, that's in female bodied beings, that's in our wombs. And in the masculine, it's in the hara, And so wantonness is in alignment with ultimately then the goddess, because again, it's connected to the women. So that pleasure is, and like the lower three chakras are affiliated with the feminine, whereas the upper chakras are the masculine, and the heart is where they meet in Kairos Gamos in divine union. So yeah, I'm not saying that we don't, I'm hearing what you're speaking to when you're talking about want versus desire, but also allowing that there is another way of looking at want, and it comes from the pleasure body and it comes from the divine feminine, if we can allow that definition to exist and course through our veins. The other piece you spoke to is that came through is, reading the energy and noticing the divine perfection of the natural order of things. And that's why it's so vital to me in the work that I know I do with my clients, is like, how do you read the signs and symbols? And I know you do this too, and you do it in your own unique way. Is like, we teach how to speak spirit, the language of God, because it matters to be able to read the signs and symbols. And yes, there are when somebody is really starting on that path, there's a lot of information out there. Like, oh, I saw this butterfly. What do butterflies mean? I'm like, oh, I saw that, it's like the wind just came in. What does that mean? When I was saying like this thing, there's a lot of things to kind of support us and in knowing what the collective definition of certain signs and symbols means. And then the next layer of reading those signs and symbols is recognizing your own comprehension of what those signs and symbols mean, and then applying them to your own specific lens of viewing the world and how you live. So you start to read life like it's the most epic story ever told, because it really just is. Like it really just is. And we touched on the storytelling and the hero and heroine's journey in our last episode. So this is all connected deeply. So everything is truly orchestrated so perfectly. Like it blows my mind that people think that we live, and I'm not dismissing this entirely when I say it, but it blows my mind when people believe that we don't live in Eden or like paradise, because there's a part of it that it's like, have you ever stopped to just pay attention to nature and realize that this is absolutely bananas that this exists? Like if I spend the rest of my life like paying attention to every blade of grass in my little patch of home here in Bali, I would probably never make it to every blade of grass. And that's just like one little piece of God, you know, and like then you think about else too, like all the other pieces that orchestrate for that blade of grass to continue to exist. It's just bonkers. And of course, the paradox also is true, which is we live in quote unquote hell, because it's also, there is, if that level of miracle and blessing exists, of heaven exists, so too does the equal and opposite of that, which is a hellscape, you know. And so it is always both. So I do get that, don't get me wrong. And the natural or order of things in my experience is that it is it is generally disposition towards goodness and towards purity. And it's like sometimes we get in the way of that. And I think the mind and the fallacy of controlling things or the lusting for power can create the hellscapes that we live in. Because if we just allow ourselves to just be, the truth is, you know, there's like 8 billion people on the planet, you know. Most people are good. You know, there's a narrative right now that humans are bad and that we have to hate ourselves and really punish ourselves for existing. And yes, there is evil that is obvious in this world. It just exists. And for 8 billion people to exist on this planet fairly harmoniously, if you really think about it on a day-to-day basis, it's that too is just we're predispositioned for goodness in general. That I that is my natural way of being too, is that I have a tendency to be more optimistic of that in that and hopeful that we can get back to that sense of innocence and purity. But that has also been my journey. The last piece I desire to speak to is this idea of free will versus destiny. And it's something I think about a lot. And I have one specific one specific brother I speak to regularly because he's pretty adamant that free will does not exist at all. And I'm like, I think it's both, you know, and I'm like, I think it's both, you know. And he's like, no, because then you as your higher self and God just has already pre-programmed you into believing that you have any kind of control over life. And actually it's just all like free will is just complete fallacy. I think it is, though, again, my belief is that it's always both, because we live in what I like to call the and, you know, it's always and. I don't believe it's or. I think it's always everything all at once. But this idea between destiny and fate is actually, I think, a little bit more interesting to focus on because they have different flavors. And there is some form of ancestral, mythological, inherited belief in fate versus destiny. And the fates, especially in like ancient Greek mythology, the fates controlled your destiny, right? And actually it was completely up to the fates to decide what was going on for you. And there is a level of fear that goes into fate. It's fated versus destiny, which is a much more empowering thing. And the way that I differentiate between destiny and fate these days is your fate is your human downfall that can and does exist if you choose to surrender to that. However, destiny is what our higher self calls us into being. It is your destiny. It is your hero and heroine's journey, destiny to fulfill a higher pursuit and calling in this heavenly, earthly body, this human form you're given. And you can choose to surrender to your destiny, or you can choose to surrender to your fate. And there's not a wrong option, but for me, fate has a level of dense energy affiliated with it that makes it feel, it just makes it feel really heavy. Like it's your fate for this to happen versus it is your destiny to choose something higher for yourself. And it's already written in the stars, and you actually don't need to choose it. And that's the beautiful thing about being a creator in a human form is you can choose your destiny, but you also don't have to. And that's why I believe then we can come back and reincarnate into different forms again and again so that we can have this experience of choosing the destiny or not and seeing what that feels like. And there's not a wrong answer. It's just a matter of like, what are you choosing? It's there for the taking, but you might not desire it. It might not feel fulfilled to pursue it. It might feel scary. There might be a lot of different stories you tell to not pursue that path. And that's also okay. It might not feel true. And yeah, this is where we start to get into quantum realities, right? Because there's a lot of different decisions that we can make in this pursuit. So it's not straightforward, but for me, when it feels true, like capital T true and divinely aligned, and you're talking getting into that alignment and energy too to co-create with the universe, it's just easeful. It's graceful. It doesn't mean it's not challenging. It doesn't mean like, oh, I don't have to think about anything or come up against my shit in any given moment. Like ultimately, if you start getting what you desire, you're going to come up against a lot of shit. Speaking from personal experience, you're going to
Yeah.
have to deal with that. Oh, I'm worthy of receiving everything I've ever desired and actually didn't even know I wanted, but it's better than I could possibly imagine. This feels too good to be true. Now what happens? So it is graceful though. There is a level of flow and gracefulness to be able to accept that calling and that pursuit and the chaos. And that is really, really scrumptious to accept. Very delicious. And scrumptious is the word that wants to come up. Yeah, like juicy. The vivacity of it. It's amazing.
I love the word scrumptious. So good.
So good, right?
It is. It can be so scrumptious. Also, like from my own experience, the mystic's path, which is what I'm going to call this always. Mysticism is seeking God. There's a very ranty article that wants to be written about that, how convoluted the word mysticism has become. Anyway, that's for another day. The mystic's path is the most confronting. It brings up the most shit, the most, because it literally looks delusional. It
Yeah.
looks insane. It
Yeah.
looks bananas because it is the exact opposite of absolutely everything that everyone on this planet is saying to you all day, every day. You have to question every aspect of your reality, right? So there is a cultivation of an inner strength and a self-trust, right? This is why I believe the conscious choice aspect is such a part of this surrendering into the destiny and being able to choose that. Like you have to become the person that can hold that. It's why nobody is enlightened overnight. It's because we would pop, we would explode and fall to pieces, right? There is a cultivation of who we are to be able to hold and follow that, because it's terrifying. It brings up every last idea and belief and thing you thought to be true, assumed to be true about life, about this world, about people, about yourself, all of that stuff. And so it takes a long time to tease that out and be able to come to grips with that. Like if we saw reality really what it was from the get-go, I mean, we would be sectioned like immediately, you know. This is where I think spiritual psychosis comes in,
Mm.
is where, and it's a serious thing, right? It's like when we're trying to apply, this might be a little side quest. I made notes of things I wanted to talk
Aw.
about, but so my little ADHD brain doesn't forget. But spiritual psychosis, and I have come to the edge of this multiple times through incredibly not nice necessarily circumstances, and also just through my own exploration. Spiritual psychosis occurs when we try to take the laws of the mind and the 3D and the logic and the rationale with us, and we try to make the quantum realm, or the realm of mysticism, the mystical laws, we try to make that behave according to our human rationale. You're trying to take the mind into a place that it is not allowed to go, because the mind is the way of keeping us safe, quote unquote. Not actual safety. It is a false sense of security. That's our control system, right? We have to cultivate a certain level of strength and be, when people talk about the gates of consciousness that you're going to go through, the states of being that you have to come into, the initiations that you have to go through, these are not orchestrated by humans. This is something that is very real in the field, is like you can't take your human mind and logic into some of these places, because it will break the psyche, it will fracture the psyche, it hurts, it's unsafe, right? So there's a level of cultivation and allowing the journey to be long, to be slow, in order that you don't end up breaking your psyche into these pieces. Like there's a very fine edge to walk, right? To be protected beyond those realms is not to become insane. It might look it to other people for a while, but actually there's a deep sanity that sets in beyond those gates when we start to let go of the mind, let go of the logical control and rationale of everything. We surrender the mind to the divine. There is a beautiful protection that comes in beyond those realms, and we stop trying to figure it out, and we just start to be in it and present with it. And there's a beautiful protection and deep healthfulness and sanity that is restored, that can look like becoming more human than ever before. It's like when people speak to being the avatar, right? You exit the game and you have the awakening, you realize it's all a game, and then you come back in you're like, well, I know the rules now. Now I'm just playing in the game. I'm not identified with the game. I recognize it's a game. I can interact with this in a different way. It's kind of that sort of thing. To cultivate the ability to go into all of this, like, I'm one of these, like, go hard or go home, push the limits, push the edges. I'll experiment on myself. Like, I don't mind if I come to the edge of breaking my psyche. Great, I'll pull myself back. Like, I have a little bit of like, I don't know. I don't do this to myself anymore. I've learned, I've gained some wisdom over time. Like, I've kind of figured that stuff out through experience. But it's the cultivation, when people ask me, because one of the things you were touching on there was, right, like seeing where we are as Eden, or seeing where we are on this planet as hell, these experiences of our perceptions, how we relate to it, how we relate to ourselves, right? Because there's for sure people out there who are having a really, really, really hard experience of life, especially right now. It can look really, really, really painful, right? There's all of this shadow stuff that, like, as humanity, we thought we were past, right? People's rights, people's well-being, wherever it is in the world, like war to the degree it's happening right now, right? These things look incredibly terrible, and they really are. And it's like, we're not here to deny any and all of that. It's what can we do personally when it looks unfathomable to us that we would ever imagine this planet as Eden, as heaven on earth. When it looks unfathomable, how on earth am I supposed to start having faith and surrendering to divinity, right? To surrendering to this thread, surrendering to the pull, surrendering into the destiny of what is meant for me. How do we actually start to do that? And the one thing I find myself saying over and over and over again is a relationship of trust is required. Not just with yourself, but with the divine. If we, the example I always say is like, imagine you met a stranger on the street. Like, you're not about to hand over your bank details to them. You know what I mean?
No. You don't do that? Oh, I thought that that was what everybody does. Oh, have I been doing it wrong? Maybe that's why there's no money in the bank account now. Oh. Oh. Hmm.
Oh,
We'll
but
talk about that more
exactly
later.
that, right? It's that. It's like there's an unfamiliarity with what divinity is because we've been
Yeah.
so programmed not to trust what we feel. We can see it. We can see it in the medical industry. We can see it everywhere, right? There's no trust in autonomy in our own bodies. We don't trust our own brains. We don't trust our own emotions. None of it. We've been
Well,
taught not to do this. So
mhm.
there's a relationship and a familiarity that I find myself saying, look, you can't have God or divinity as a concept or a source energy that's floating around. Cool. And like that's nice. Does that help you personally? It can feel distant, right? There is a deeper relationship with divinity that is personal, that is available. And the same way that if you were to build a friendship with someone, if you want someone in the world to be there for you when you're going through a hard time, when you want to ask someone for help or guidance, when you're unclear on what direction you're going in, like if you want that relationship of trust and vulnerability and being able to show up, not that the divine requires this from you, but for your sense of trust and that conscious choice, for our individual trust in that, we need to tend to relationship. We need to
Yeah.
build a foundation of trust, and that takes time and communication. I believe prayer is the thing, is to start having that communion, that conversation, inviting that presence in on a personal level, because otherwise it's like we're just being asked to leap off a cliff and we've no idea if anything will catch us. But if you personally get to know not just of a universal or loving or sacred whatever concept of universal source energy, but a voice that speaks or a knowing that's in your body, or that feeling of being at home and being protected, and an individual, I know in my being, not what God is, but I don't just see it operating on the planet. I feel it alive in my being, guiding. I feel the protection. I feel the guidance. I feel the knowing. So it's like, how do we start to change whether we choose the destined path, the Eden perception, the desire that calls us forwards, leaping into faith, trusting that we can move into the unknown? I believe it starts with a prayer. I don't know what or who you are. I don't know if what I believe. I don't know where I'm meant to go. I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know how to communicate with you. Please, please show me. Can I just be in your presence? I don't even know what you are. I don't know what this is a beautiful
Mm.
opening to begin. If you're struggling, if you're in the weeds of like, this is hell on earth, a beautiful way to start to get some relief and some opening and to build a space of trust so you can start following the thread that will lift you out in its own very illogical, strange way, is to start inviting that thread to come alive in your body and speak in that way. And just going hands open. I don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know what to believe. I don't know any of it. I would like to know you. Please help me know you. And it's so powerful as a transform. When we open the door a little crack, divinity comes flooding in incredible ways. We just, again, it's the conscious choice, right? We just got to make a choice to be like, I'm willing.
Well, spirit, I mean, it's so, I love everything that you're saying. And it just feels nice to just receive everything that's coming to you right now. Cause it's just like, yep, yep, yep. Just that is so beautiful. So thank you for this transmission, babe. So far, it's been so
Thanks
lovely to
for
receive.
letting me get it all out.
No, it's so powerful. It's really lovely. There's so much coming through. Right now, it's this concept of faith and reestablishing faith, and where I'm now realizing, I'm just like asking, like, when did we lose that, and where has that been lost? And it's not really surprising that this concept of Eden has come up in the conversation, because I actually think it goes back to our girl Eve, and there is the obvious story, myth of Eve being tempted by Lucifer as the snake and then eating from the apple tree, the tree of knowledge. But then there's a lesser known version of that where it's like, what if Eve had the embodied gnosis from the great serpent, which is just the goddess energy in ancient storytelling? The serpent is always the goddess, Kundalini, and in Sanskrit, in the ancient light language of India, Kundalini is like the goddess, Kund, cunt. For those who don't like that word, get over it. It's not actually a bad thing. It's been twisted to be a bad thing over time. But the reality is that word stems from goddess, deep goddess energy that cuts through everything, And what if Eve was listening to the embodied divinity of the goddess and went to eat from the apple tree? In Celtic mythology, the apple tree is the tree transport into the fairy realms, is the way that you can get from this realm into the magical realm that exists on this plane. What if she knew that the narrative that was given by Yahweh, who is a single God, a vindictive God, in fact, that you must behave a certain way in order to achieve, do as I say. And she's like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I would like to see things for myself. And I trust that. Trusting the intuitive ancient impulse to consume the apple and receive illumination of how things actually are, which is magical and daunting and strange and everything all at once. And therefore there's that the quote unquote fall of man. So I think that there is something mythologically ingrained in the collective consciousness, whether people are directly connected to that Judeo-Christian mythology or not, as of colonialism and everything and the widespreadness of the what was it called? It's just the holy warfare and spreading Christianity and all of that. That's prevalent everywhere, regardless of how you relate to it or not, just
You
because of
mean
the nature of things.
the Romans?
Probably. Oh, probably.
Is this our moment to just, is it
Can
the
we just
Romans'
bring
fault?
I keep forgetting to bring them in. What's wrong with me? Anyways, yeah, thank you so much for bringing that back, because I would like to continue to make that a thing again, because it's just so fun. But that is the narrative, and it's just this is a collective ancient wound of not trusting the divinity within. And the goddess is nature. Why do you think we call it Mother Nature? I know in ancient Egypt, there was actually this concept of Father Earth and Mother Sky. So there's something also really interesting with that too. And that comes into some different energies of polarity and all of that. But in general, the concept of the Mother Earth, you know, even the word matrix, matter, which is the mother. There's something really interesting about being able to trust that deep natural space that we hold within ourselves that is truly divine. And yeah, there's nothing more I think I want to say on that. And that it's just like, I feel like this is an ancient wound to not trust the divine and to rebuild faith, right? Because there is a distinction too between trust and faith. There's a layer of deepening where trust is more superficial. Do I trust this person? Do I trust myself? And there can be such a thing as deep trust, but faith is the undercurrent of that. And it's really the next level. And it's like, can I surrender to faith? Right? Can I really, truly surrender to something greater than myself that's being orchestrated outside of my awareness, my conscious awareness, and the very limited scope of what I can visibly see from my narrow human capacities, because it is limited. And that is really the confronting thing on this journey of surrendering to the chaos energy, because the feminine is the chaos energy. It's Kali in the Hindu pantheon and tradition of dancing wildly to save the world and then getting so caught up in it that she almost destroys it. It's that level of chaos energy that we have to surrender to. And knowing that it can, if out of balance, be destructive, right? But it's finding the balance in that as well. And this is why I think humans are also just obsessed with balance. Although, strangely enough, so like obsessed with the extremes of life, like we've kind of forgotten that it's all about balance. These days it's like hanging on the pendulum from one, and it's like actually when you come into harmony of balance, everything starts to feel really gentle and again peaceful and easeful, I should say. And we're so used to tumultuousness and terror and trauma that's why we're swinging in general from the polar opposites. But actually, like bringing your nervous system into a space where peace and harmony and potentially boredom, something that feels actually very stable can feel very boring. I know I personally been navigating that. I come into some realization that I might have some emotional addiction and dramatic tendencies. Shocker to anybody remotely who knows me or even has listened to a few of these podcasts. But it's coming into this homeostasis of peace, of faith, of surrender, of the still point, the origin point of allowing truth and God to emerge.
So beautiful. I love the exploration there with the story of Eve as well. And what just dropped deeply into my heart, I almost felt like weeping for a minute there. It's like, of course, it would be the feminine. It's like, I want to experience it to go, okay, if the trauma of separation is what's needed for me to get to re-experience and remember and live the experience of finding the divine, like that is beautiful. If we're just there floating around in God consciousness, primordial, magical, divine soup, We don't get this journey of feeling separate, alone, confused, and then awakening into the miraculous nature of reconnection and remembrance. And it really is home. It's home. It's what it
Yeah.
feels like. And it's so beautiful. And it's like, wow, so glad in this lifetime I get to do this in a human body and experience this, all the lostness, all the, it's like, it's well and good saying this on the other side of this, where like this deep reconnection with divinity on so many levels, through so many moments, through so many initiations that were very humbling. But the agony and the ecstasy, I mean, unrivaled.
Well, it's alive. Well, what you're speaking to is aliveness. And it's really to be alive, not just being told what to think. There is such a thing as blind faith. I believe this
Yeah.
because I've been told this, versus I believe this because I feel the truth of it, because I desire to experience it, because I have experienced it. And so many humans, I think, these days have been taught, have been brainwashed into blind faith with whatever it is, whether it's nationalism, whether it's religion, whatever, capitalism, consumerism, whatever ism out there that exists that is trying to convince you of your separateness. People have surrendered their aliveness to thinking, because they have been told that that is the definition of what it means to be alive, versus actually feeling aliveness. And the only way you can experience aliveness is to experiences, experiential learning. I mean, even just think about it in a natural way. The first 7 years of your life and your basis for understanding and moving through the world for the rest of your being is through your experiences as a babe, as a child, experiencing wonder, experiencing play, experiencing loss, experiencing all of it, right? And then you spend the rest of your life then trying to like kind of undo some of those things that came through when you first started learning them. But it's this aliveness and vibrancy in the living of a life, to me, is the whole point. It's not, I kind of am over the phrase like, we're done surviving, we're here to thrive. And I'm like, what about just living? What if that were enough? Because then you can do all of it. And there is something else that's come through. Let's see if I can remember it. I literally just lost it. Yeah, it'll come back as it needs to, but it's a really beautiful thing to allow your aliveness to exist. Oh, I remember. Haha, I knew it would come back. This illusion of separateness because it's always like you have to start in this one place and it comes back to the hero and heroine's journey. So go back and listen to that episode, which was the last one. And if you're just starting now, we have to start at a certain point and experience everything else before we come back. And it's this interesting like microcosm of starting from home, experiencing the separateness fully before coming back into wholeness. And along the awakening journey, along that path, I do believe, and I've experienced this for myself, and I've heard it enough from beloveds and from clients to know at this point that along the awakening journey, you must go so far down the rabbit hole of separateness, of experiencing yourself so deeply egoically, like I was born at this time and this is exactly my astrology chart, and I'm this and this chart, and I am this way, and I can channel this way, and I have these gifts, and it's all about how I express divinity and finding your separateness, distinguishing yourself as a certain identity. I am a priestess. I am even in non-spiritual realms, you can identify as like, I am definitely LGBTQIA, like I am definitely this, I am definitely it doesn't matter what you identify as. Like I am a white woman, like I am, I am Jewish. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Whatever your identity is, we become so obsessed and cling to our human identity because it's part of the awakening journey. Because at a certain point in that process, you actually become so over identified with your identity that you start to lose yourself and you start realizing actually none of that really matters. And you start to find the similarities between you and everyone else,
Mm.
regardless of how you identify in any capacity of your life. And then you find the similarities and you go, wow, just because I'm a white woman in this body, in this 3D plane, doesn't mean I have nothing in connection with this other group of humans who identify completely differently. Wow, where are the similarities? And so you come along on the journey through this deep separation, which is beautiful, but also incredibly painful
Mm.
in my experience. And then on the other side is where we start to shift and you go, wow, look at the similarities and the aliveness between me and the entire world. I am no different than this tree before me if I allow myself to witness the similarities between us. And I can honor and revere the differences. I can listen to somebody who has a completely different opinion of the world, an experience of the world from mine, and honor it, whether I actually believe what they are saying or not to be true in my experience or in my understanding and comprehension of how divinity works. But it doesn't make it less true and it doesn't make it less valid. And I can find the distinction. Like something that I've gotten into the habit of in the past year, and I love it so much. So I go to ecstatic dance every Sunday here in Ubud, and it feels like church. Like it's ecstatic. It's like you see the community, everyone is playing and in whatever process they're in. And, there's hugs and weeps and whatever it is. And what I do at ecstatic dance as I actually watch people, which might be terrifying for some people to like realize that I do this. Like I'm watching you dance. Some people are like really scared to move their bodies. And I'm like, yeah, I'm watching. And I don't mean it in that way. I mean, I love watching people and I can see them in their innocence.
Mm.
And I watch people and I go, wow, I can see exactly what kind of little boy, so and so was and still is in a lot of ways and how they're moving their body. Or I see the sweetness and the joy and the tenderness because all of us just are these, walking wounds, if you will, of the traumas that we carry. And how open-hearted or closed off we are to the world is dependent on how much we allow ourselves to experience the world in our aliveness. And at the end of the day, we are all just children. And I think we can all get on board with this love of children and the desire to protect the innocence and support it, regardless of your background, regardless of where you've come from, regardless of how you interact with children or don't on a daily basis. There is a true love and a fondness for children, even people who live in a twisted way around like children. There's like with pedophilia and everything, and I'm not making that right, but it's still this obsession. No, but there still is an obsession and desire for innocence that somebody has twisted in their own
Yeah.
experience. That's what I mean. I'm not trying to make it okay. It's just like, regardless of your background, there is a desire to call back into the innocence that everybody can be on board with, at a certain level. And there might be
Mm.
some that need some tweaking and finesse so that we're, protecting the children rather than traumatizing them. But it's this.
It's a massive topic on the planet. And don't worry, I know exactly where you're coming from. I know what you mean.
I'm just
Um,
making sure everybody else does.
the
Sometimes I'm like talking about something and I'm like, I know how this is going
it's
to sound, but I don't mean it that way.
it's it's actually the complete inversion. So I was listening, and I know for sure there are people who do not appreciate this human being.
Hmm.
I listen to a lot of Jordan B. Peterson, Dr.
Hmm.
Jordan B. Peterson, not because I agree with I don't know, his values or whatever, but he expresses the way he thinks in a critical manner, and the questioning and the understanding as a clinical psychiatrist, psychologist, he expresses his questioning process. And in a moment where I was like, I want to improve my thinking skill again. I want to have critical thinking ability, and listening to the way he structures his process is very supportive in sharpening that. Anyway, so he is a clinical psychiatrist or psychologist. I could be getting one of anyway, whatever his
Yeah.
job role. He has seen a lot of the darkness and the unstable side of humanity. He specifically addressed this because I think it was, oh, I'm gonna confuse, it could have been Michael Malice. There was someone he was chatting to, and it was like this 10-minute clip, and it was someone saying like, can you please explain to me why this happens,
Mm.
because this is the one thing we don't understand, right? It's pedophilia is the one thing that we find it incomprehensible,
Mm-hmm.
the darkest of the evilest of the things. And the way he explained it was there is an extremely distorted, twisted need to destroy innocence.
Mm.
And that's why we don't understand it, because most of us are inherently good. Most of us are good. I see the world in the same way you do. I believe in the goodness of be it humans. I believe in there is something that has been so deeply inverted
Mm-hmm.
that is to do with that is innocent, and I want to destroy it, violate what is innocent. There
Mm.
is nothing to me that could be further from divinity than that,
Yeah.
to destroy that which is the most pure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to fake, which is why most of us cannot comprehend, cannot, like most things we can go, okay, shadow stuff, right? I can get my head around
Mm-hmm.
why. Not that I agree, but I can understand to some degree, like I can understand how you ended up there, right? Through
Mm-hmm.
wounding, through whatever it is. This we
Yeah.
find incomprehensible because most of us do not desire to destroy innocence. We desire to protect, uplift, and expand innocence. And that is a key difference, I believe, between just on a wider context, right? Between how we understand good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily, I mean, this is probably a whole other conversation for another time. I think there is an organic light and dark. I think this is part of the divine matrix. I think there's organic light to dark that occurs in nature, that occurs in the spirit realm, that occurs in all that we are as humans. There is organic light to dark within the dark. It's like the yin yang, right? Within the dark, there is the light that we can find. Within the light, there is the dark that we can find. And there's all of that. Then I think there is inversion, which I believe
Yeah.
to be true evil, actually, which is the complete upside down, inside out version of what things are.
Well,
And
it's interesting
yeah,
because now, I mean, just bringing it back into divine order and nature, right? What you're speaking to when you're speaking to inversion, that is not the natural order of things,
mm,
and that is not the divine chaos we're speaking to. To me, there is something that is inherently constructed and man-made, and I don't mean like made by a man, but like human made, that has been inverted, whatever, and like wherever that has come from. And there can be, I'm sure that there's a lot of different theories of where this energy is coming from. But like there is the way that I distinguish a lot of the things is like there is the constructed world of man that exists. And then there is, Earth, which is the natural order. And there's different lenses, and like that world that's been constructed when I'm speaking to that is connected to this 3D matrix that is constructed with a false reality, a narrative that is deeply limiting versus something that is much more expansive and natural. Because I mean, again, like just comprehending the miraculousness of something that is natural. Like a platypus exists. That's kind of weird that a platypus exists. There's something, and I know that's just trying to move it away from all the darkness into the platypi. Anyways, whatever. Just is like I don't know what they're called, but like there's something. It's just like wow, that even in that kind of chaos of even just a platypus is a naturally chaotic animal that exists. It doesn't make any sense, but it does exist. And we I don't know where I'm going on this tangent at this point, but there is something that is inverted that feels created not by the creator, but by something else that's infiltrated the natural order of things and been conflated to be, I'll say, normal. Like there's like, and not to say that evil things are normal in this world, but I don't know, there has come into this matrix world a natural not a natural, I'm going to say an unnatural acceptance of evil that
Yeah.
people allow themselves to be witness to, that is creating even heavier darkness in the world. That is incredible. Like even just feeling it, I'm like, oh my God, I feel so dense talking about this. It's so heavy in my system to even just like fathom that people are just allowing themselves to go to sleep at night listening to like cold cases of like murder stories. And like I get that I know people who do that. I used to, do some of this myself, but just like there is something deeply disturbing when people allow themselves to just recognize that that is the natural quote unquote order of things, where it's like actually those inversions don't need to quite exist in the way that they do. There's something else
Mm.
going on here. Because
Yeah.
to me, even though there's this, when you're speaking to this organic spectrum of light and dark, there's a lightness to both, even when it feels intense, like the violence that comes
There's a
from like
naturalness.
right,
There's
like the
the
violent.
lumen naturae, right?
Exactly. It's the dark light within. Like, yes, there is violence in the natural order of things. A crocodile eating a deer, that's violent. It's naturally violent. But there is a natural order of
It's
the
part of
things.
the natural order. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's one of my desires for humanity as we move into this Plutonian Aquarian age is that we will come into more resonance and harmony over what is truly natural and what is constructed, quote unquote, normal, but deeply unnatural. And that the
Yeah.
awareness can start to shift into something that's much more creative rather than destructive. Because right now, and it's kind of connected to, I think, what I was speaking to earlier. We've been taught to hate ourselves so much as humans. We are destroying everything. And it's just like this perpetual mouth, just like just we're just like
Mm. The
eating
hungry
away at
ghost.
ourselves. It's so awful. And it's just like, what are you putting your energy into? We just don't need to be destructive in this kind of way. There is healthy destruction, and then there's completely inverted
Yeah.
like destruction as well.
Just consumption. It's consumption.
Yeah.
That's what it is like we're just consuming and consuming and consuming. That is the ultimate way to change the course of history right now, to change the course of the planet. Create more than you consume.
Mhm.
Rebalance, tip the scales, create divinity into the world. Bring it in, bring it through, right? Create more than we consume, because otherwise we're just like imploding in on ourselves
Yeah.
by consuming like a black hole, just like consuming everything within us. Like what is, you know, inversion evil? Well, it's taking, consuming, siphoning, sucking, depleting, draining, exhausting, using, right? What is natural? What is beautiful? Replenishing, giving, restoring, offering, creating,
Sur
all of
surrendering.
that. Yeah. Yeah. That's how we create this shift. create more than you consume. I don't mean create stuff that other people can consume, right?
Yeah.
Not to buy into the creation, consumption, for consumption paradigm. It's like, can I have enough? And can I give from overflow? Can I be in the world and put more into it than I take out of it? Can I trust that when I give, it's going to come back and I don't need to know where from? It's like, this is the just, I'm just giving for the sake of giving, like nature, and trusting that the symbiosis amongst everything else falls into place beautifully, right? The tree's not putting out the fruit going, well, what am I getting in return? Oh, birdie, who is eating my fruit? No, there's a natural giving. The tree, I just want to highly recommend The Service Berry as a book to anyone listening. Beautiful. It's short, sweet. It's written by, I'm going to not remember her name, but, or his name, or someone, whoever's name it is. The Service Berry was written by the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, I think,
Mm.
if I remember correctly. But I had that on my audiobooks at the end of last year. And it's, it's so beautiful. It describes this principle very, very beautifully in nature, that there is just a giving. And can we remember to do that in community? Because a lot of Indigenous communities know how to do this. The wisdom is still here. The wisdom is alive. The knowing is there. We just have to look to nature, how to embody inherent symbiosis and divine order. Just look at nature. Look at how nature does its thing. It'll teach you every time. It'll be the greatest teacher. The elementals, let them be the teacher, right?
Yeah.
Let them be the guide. And we can restore a sense of harmony and balance that is natural, organic, beautiful. Yes, there's a range of flavors of what naturalness is, but it fits in with the symbiosis
Yeah.
as a whole.
Mm.
Just like play your part, and that is just to create and not to
Yeah.
be in
Well,
charge of the rest of it.
well, I mean, that ties in directly to our episode on the muse and actually how slow true creation can take some time to actually receive that level of creation energy rather than like this very quick consumptive creative energy that has a tendency to be very I'll say mindful, but not in the way that people mean that these days, but like to be full of the mind, like versus to be like, you know, consciously moving through the world. There's a distinction between that. I
Mm.
I think that this kind of natural order is inherent in each and every one of us. And for those of us that have feel really distinct and separate from nature, especially those who live in the Western world and have more actually I think it's true for anyone, really truly. I think regardless of your background, but regardless of your ancestry, if you feel separate from the elements, if you feel separate from that kind of naturalness of self, is go back into your bloodline, go back into your ancestry, and that's a way in, that's a thread in to the elements. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way, but it does give this remembrance. And I can speak from my personal experience of that when I started tapping into my mother's lineage, the Celtic line, and note and like learning more about the ways of the druids and the shamans of that line, then it started giving me a really beautiful flavor for embracing the elements in a way that felt true for me.
Mm.
You know, I started burning juniper and lavender and rosemary rather than white sage and Palo Santo. White sage being indigenous plant to North America and Palo Santo being to the Central and South Americas. And nothing wrong with that. My body was born in North America, so I now do burn white sage. You know, I've gone back to that space because I know that's where this body has come from, so I can burn that with a different reverence and understanding. But burning, you know, the plants of my ancestors, that gave me something to connect to that felt much truer, and
Mm.
I loved that. So I think that that's a way in, and it's again along this journey of awakening. It's part of the separation, right? Like I am of this lineage, like by blood, and that makes me distinct and special in this kind of a way and how I interact with the world. But then realizing, oh, wow, look at what all of these other beautiful ancestries and lineages do and how similar they actually are. And aren't we all just the same? And it's just a different flavoring. So that gives people a
Mm.
tangible way, I think, of tapping into what you're speaking to, Jess, because sometimes it's like, yeah, just look at nature. And that's a very obvious thing, but some people are so separate from nature at this point that still feels very foreign to us, you know? So it's like, okay, make it more about yourself. How did the people who helped make sure that you are here on this earth do it so that you can use, you know, that embodied gnosis, that forgotten gnosis, to tap into something bigger than yourself once again.
Mm. So beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling such a strong, we're talking about this like coming back around to, coming home to. I feel like this may be potentially, we can feel into it like a whole other episode, but speaking to the sacred return, and you were speaking to this earlier about like first, and this is in the way we grow up, right? We have tribal consciousness, then we must individuate and have individual consciousness, which is like teenage rebellion, right? We go, I'm not that, and I'm not that, and I'm not that. I'm not my parents, and I'm not this thing. This is what I'm choosing to identify with, create this identity. And then we come back around as it becomes just deeply embodied, and it gets to be this lens through which the divine can transmit the exact medicine that's meant to come from us, through us, in our creation, in our contribution, right? Like I had it with addiction. How did I You use such a beautiful phrase there too, which was something stated to me early on going to recovery meetings. It was like, look for the similarities, not the differences. Because if you separate yourself, you run the risk of walking the fuck out of that door and never coming back. Look for the similarities, find your people. And then I had to evolve beyond that because I didn't want to sit and keep identifying myself as an alcoholic forevermore. It is in my story though, and I can transmit that energy and I can transmit that relatability. Someone might need to hear that through my lens of experience, right? But I don't identify, right? This
Yeah.
is beautiful sacred return. I see this with patterns. I see
Mm-hmm.
this with all of the things we have to go through, that beautiful thing to bring it ties into our storytelling piece, right? How do we alchemize? How do we shift it? Well, we go through this sacred return
Mm-hmm.
process.
I love that. I feel like that's a beautiful little little cliffhanger to leave people with for a potential next episode because that's feeling really alive, especially moving into this more collective way of doing things, moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, moving from
Mm,
the individual and the individuation into the collective. And I mean, as an American, I'm very tuned in to what's happening energetically in America, in the US right now, but the US is going through a Pluto return and essentially moving from a very individuated way of being, like completely obsessed with separation of self and on so many levels. And and we're moving into a space where it's like, okay, it's actually about coming back together. So I feel like us has gotten to shattering point of that and is a really beautiful example of like, all right, we've gotten to the point of no return with the individuation and individualism. Actually, I'll say
mm.
individualism, not so much individuation. We could use
Yeah,
some more of
there.
that,
I
actually.
agree. There's a
There's a difference.
differentiation between those energies, right?
Totally. But it's
Yeah.
gotten to such a point of individualism that we must now go into more collectivism. And I think in order to get there, there actually is some sort of transmutation from the individual to the individuated individual into the collective that's actually more in alignment with caring for one another and coming back into wholeness. So cool.
There's a real war going on between the shadow sides of that individual over collective and collectivism over individualism. Both of these are distorted right now because it is codependency versus self-sufficiency.
Hmm.
Neither of these are helpful. Individuation, so both need to come together to heal codependent. It's just empowerment, right? Individuation and interdependency.
Yeah. And just bringing it back to our topic too, it's those coming together with empowerment and surrender. Releasing definition of what it must be, and considering that there's another way of doing it.
Considering letting go of I know best. Maybe there's a bigger plan. Can I step back? Instead of going, I'm right, they're wrong, can we step back and go, maybe the boss upstairs knows?
Well,
However you relate to God or the
what
divine.
is what is that phrase? Is like, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy?
You
It's
know,
like,
that was the album title of Meredith Brooks' album. Do you remember the song I'm a bitch, I'm a lover,
oh,
I'm a
yeah, yeah,
child,
yeah.
I'm a
Of
mother?
course.
Yeah. So the front of her album cover, it said, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? I used to think this was a deep philosophical question to be pondered. That shows where my mind was at the time.
How beautiful.
I was like, oh, wow, let me weigh up the pros and cons of this thing and really think deeply about it. I was in my teens and very angsty and not in a healthy brain space in any way. But later on, I'm looking back, I'm like,
Oh God.
at the time, I was like, wow, what an interesting question. Oh my gosh, let me chew on this. Now I'm like, oh, good grief.
Good grief. Beautiful. Oh, my love. What did you see? What a juicy and interesting topic. I know we were
Mm.
feeling some density around like, ooh, what is wanting to be spoken to, and what is there something out there that doesn't actually want us to speak to this thing because it was feeling sticky energetically. And I can kind of see why. I can kind of see why that existed. And it's like, I'm glad we just did it
Went for
anyway.
it.
Woo! Yeah. So
Yay.
yeah, thank you, my love. And thank you to all of those who are on the journey with us today.
Thank you so much. So
Woo.
many quantum potentials of episodes we've opened up there. So
Let's see where we
we
go
will
next.
see y'all in the next one.
Yeah.
Mwah!
Ciao.